They thought he was just a child, a quiet, 8-year-old boy clinging to the hem of his mother's coat, as she stood accused of a crime she didn't commit. His name? Isaiah King, a name that would, by the end of that unforgettable day in court, be etched into every mind that witnessed what happened. It all began in a cold courtroom in Atlanta, where justice had long forgotten the forgotten. Isaiah's mother, Tamara King, a single mother and school janitor, was facing felony charges, fraud, embezzlement, and theft. The allegations came from no other than her employer, the prestigious Crestwood Academy, a place that looked down on people like her while depending on their labor to keep their floors polished and their toilets clean. Tamara had no money for a high-powered lawyer. She had no fancy degree, no one in her corner but her son. But what the world didn't know, what the prosecution certainly didn't know, was that Isaiah had been silently studying the law for 2 years. While other kids watched cartoons, Isaiah read old court transcripts. He sat in libraries while his mother worked night shifts, poring over legal dictionaries, watching courtroom videos, memorizing arguments, understanding precedent. Not because he wanted to be a lawyer, but because deep down he knew one day he might need to be, and that day came fast. The court-appointed attorney walked out 15 minutes before the trial. "No chance of winning," he said. "She's done." But when the judge asked if Mrs. King would defend herself, a small voice rose from the front bench. "Your Honor, may I speak?" All eyes turned. The courtroom laughed. The judge squinted over his glasses. "Son, this is a court of law, not a classroom." But Isaiah didn't flinch. "I understand, Your Honor, but Georgia Statute 17-9-1 doesn't prohibit a non-lawyer from speaking in one's defense if no legal counsel is present and no objection is raised." Silence. The room froze. Even the prosecutor paused, tapping into his tablet to check if the boy was right. He was. The judge hesitated, then nodded. "Proceed." What happened next was nothing short of history. Isaiah walked to the defense table, eyes full of fire, and placed a small notebook on the desk. Inside were handwritten arguments, notes, and laws he'd memorized. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice clear, steady, "my mother is innocent, and I'm going to prove it." The challenge? Tamara was accused of stealing over $20,000 through fraudulent payroll entries. The school CFO, a man named Richard Whitmore, a man who once told Tamara to stick to mops and leave numbers to smart folks, was a star witness. He presented doctored records, claimed Tamara had accessed payroll systems she didn't even have passwords for, and painted her as desperate and deceptive. The courtroom, filled with Crestwood staff and even media, leaned toward a guilty verdict. But Isaiah had been watching, not just today, but for years. He began his cross-examination with precision. "Mr. Whitmore," Isaiah said, "can you tell the court the model of the device you say my mother used?" Whitmore laughed. "What does that matter?" "It matters," Isaiah pressed, "because the device you listed, an HP Elite book, isn't compatible with the school's internal payroll app unless it's authorized by the IT department, and I subpoenaed their logs." He held up the document. There was no authorization. Gasps. The judge leaned forward. Whitmore shifted. "But maybe that was a mistake," Whitmore said. Isaiah nodded. "That's possible. So let's look at the time of the so-called login. 11:37 p.m. But here's security footage from that night." He clicked play on a screen. The footage showed Tamara mopping the gymnasium, time-stamped 11:37 p.m. And just like that, the jury's posture changed. The atmosphere shifted. Over the next hour, Isaiah dismantled every claim. He exposed falsified signatures, referenced previous employee complaints buried by Crestwood, and showed how the school had a history of scapegoating low-level workers when audits went wrong. And then came the climax. Isaiah brought up a financial report Whitmore had filed, one that mysteriously included a $20,000 consulting fee. But the bank transfer went to a shell company tied to Whitmore's brother-in-law. The prosecutor objected. The judge overruled. The jury looked stunned. The tide had turned. The courtroom, once filled with arrogance, now sat in stunned silence. Whitmore's smug confidence melted into panic. Tamara clutched her chest, whispering prayers. And Isaiah stood tall, unwavering. tears glistening in his eyes but refusing to fall. "All we ever wanted," he said quietly, "was to be treated fair." By the end of the day, the judge dismissed all charges against Amara. But more than that, he ordered an immediate investigation into Crestwood's financial department. Reporters swarmed. The prosecutor asked to shake Isaiah's hand. The jury applauded. Even the courtroom guards wiped away tears. Justice had been served, but the story wasn't over. Because as Amara and Isaiah walked out of the courtroom, past flashing cameras and tearful strangers chanting their names, a sleek black car rolled up across the street. A man stepped out, bald, gray suit, sharp eyes. He said nothing, but watched Isaiah for a long moment, then smiled and slipped something into his pocket. A photo of Isaiah standing at the defense table. Why? Because the boy had exposed more than corruption. He'd stirred something bigger, something hidden, a secret that Crestwood and people far more dangerous than Whitmore had buried for decades. And now they knew his name. They thought it ended in that courtroom. They thought justice had been served and the boy would disappear into the background. Just another headline swallowed by the next news cycle. But Isaiah King wasn't done. What he uncovered while defending his mother wasn't just evidence of one man's fraud. It was a crack in the wall of something far more dangerous. And someone was watching. 2 weeks after the trial, Isaiah and his mother tried to return to normal. Tamara got her job back, temporarily. The school board issued a public apology. But late one night, Isaiah was sitting by the window of their small apartment, re-watching the courtroom footage. Pausing it again and again on the moment Richard Whitmore panicked. There, on the screen, just before Whitmore reached for a folder, was a reflection on the glass wall behind him. A man in the back row, wearing a pin with the Crestwood crest, but that man never signed into the visitor log, and his face didn't appear in any of the courtroom footage aired on TV. Isaiah's instincts kicked in. The next day, while Tamara was out grocery shopping, Isaiah biked to the library and began digging deeper into Crestwood's financials. He knew how. He'd taught himself how. But what he found wasn't on any school computer. It was buried deep inside a closed archive server, password protected, encrypted, hidden, but it only made him more curious. Then came the break. Isaiah remembered something. During the trial, Whitmore had misspoken. He referenced an internal audit that, legally, never should have existed unless a government agency was involved. Why would a private academy have federal files? Unless they were laundering money for someone else. Isaiah traced those consulting fees to multiple fake companies, and those companies, all connected to one firm, Orient Holdings, a name the average person wouldn't recognize. But behind that name, private prisons, defense contractors, lobbyists, politicians. The deeper Isaiah looked, the darker it got. And then the warning came. Tamara returned home one night to find her door cracked open. Nothing stolen, nothing broken. But Isaiah's notebooks? Gone. Tamara panicked. "Baby, what did you do?" Isaiah looked her in the eye. "I think I found out why they wanted to blame you." That night, a man showed up at their door. Same bald head, same sharp suit, the one from the courthouse. He didn't threaten them. He didn't even raise his voice. All he said was, "You're smart, Isaiah. That much is clear. But some doors, once opened, can't be closed. Walk away, please." And then he was gone. But Isaiah couldn't walk away. Not when he knew what he knew. Not when he discovered the name Project Silencer, a secret initiative buried inside government budgets, funding experiments in juvenile detention centers. Crestwood wasn't just a school. It was a recruitment ground. Low-income students, mostly black, mostly ignored. The perfect cover, the perfect victims. Isaiah realized the people who framed his mom did it to protect this pipeline. She found a payment she wasn't supposed to see. She asked too many questions, and they needed her gone, silenced, but she wasn't, because her son had exposed them. And now, they were scrambling. The climax came faster than anyone expected. One morning, Isaiah found a flash drive slipped under their door. No note, just a drive. Inside, audio files, emails, scanned documents. proof that Crestwood's board was receiving kickbacks to push problem students into disciplinary systems that funnel kids into privatized youth jails. Tamara's voice trembled as she read them. This is evil. They had two choices: run or fight. Isaiah chose fight. He uploaded the files anonymously, sent them to journalists, civil rights attorneys, online whistleblower forums, and then they waited. The backlash was explosive. News vans surrounded Crestwood. The headmaster resigned. Richard Whitmore was arrested. Congressional members issued statements. Isaiah and Tamara were offered police protection. Their small apartment became a fortress of fear and flashing cameras. But that wasn't the end. One night, as Isaiah sat staring at the flickering TV, there was a knock. Not on the door, on his window. He pulled back the curtain, and there stood a girl, maybe 10, dressed in plain clothes. She slid a piece of paper under the glass. One sentence written in shaky handwriting: "You're not the only one. Help us." Isaiah's world shifted. He realized the system was bigger than Crestwood, bigger than Atlanta. There were others, other kids, other mothers, all waiting for someone brave enough to speak. And Isaiah, he wasn't done, because what started as a courtroom defense had just become a revolution, and someone was leading it from the shadows. If the story shook you, if it made you feel something in your chest, don't stay silent. Share it. Comment, "We believe Isaiah," if you're with him. And subscribe, because part 3 will uncover the secret network hiding in plain sight. The children they failed are rising. And Isaiah King is just the beginning. Justice was only the spark. Now it's a fire.